She threw him and his sick child away. Clueless, he owned a billion-dollar empire. Olivia Hayes walked out on her quiet, struggling husband, Daniel Hayes, leaving him behind with their fragile, sick child so she could marry a richer, more powerful man, believing she had finally upgraded her life. But what she didn't know was that Daniel wasn't broke. He was the hidden owner of a billion-dollar empire, the very world she was trying to enter. And while she chose wealth over love, he chose silence over pride. But when the truth finally unfolds in front of everyone, will she realize she abandoned everything that truly mattered? And will it already be too late to undo the damage? Olivia Hayes had always feared one thing: being left behind in life, not just financially, but socially. She hated the idea of watching others rise while she stayed stuck in place. And lately, that fear had turned into resentment, because every time she looked at Daniel, she saw stagnation. "You said things would change," Olivia said sharply, standing in the living room of their modest home. "You said this was temporary." Daniel sat beside a small hospital bed placed near the window, gently adjusting the blanket around their son, Ethan. The boy was pale, weak, his breathing soft but uneven. Every movement Daniel made was careful, protective. "I know what I said," Daniel replied quietly, not taking his eyes off the child. "And I'm working on it." "Working on it?" Olivia scoffed. "Daniel, our son is sick, really sick, and we can barely afford his treatment." Daniel's hands paused for a brief second, but he didn't turn around. "Yes, I'm handling it," he said. That calm tone again, that same quiet confidence that to Olivia felt like denial. "No, you're not," she snapped. "You keep saying that, but nothing changes." Daniel finally stood up slowly and faced her. There was no anger in his eyes, just something deeper, something she didn't understand. "He's getting the best care he needs," Daniel said firmly. Olivia laughed bitterly. "The best care? In this house? With these bills piling up?" She grabbed a stack of unpaid notices from the table and threw them down. "This is your best care?" Daniel looked at the papers, then back at her. "You don't have to worry about the bills," he said calmly. That was it. That was the breaking point. "Stop saying that," Olivia shouted. Stop acting like everything is under control when it's clearly not." The child stirred slightly from the noise, letting out a weak cough. Daniel immediately turned back, his entire focus shifting to the boy. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered softly, gently rubbing his son's back. That moment, that quiet, intimate care, should have softened Olivia, but instead, it made her feel invisible, like she didn't matter, like everything revolved around a life she didn't choose. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling, but not with sadness, with frustration. Daniel didn't respond, didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge her words. And that silence felt like rejection. "I met someone," she continued. That got his attention. Slowly, Daniel turned. "His name is Richard Cole," Olivia said. He owns multiple properties, businesses. He's successful." Daniel studied her face carefully. "And?" he asked. Olivia lifted her chin slightly. "He can give me the life I deserve." There it was, the truth, raw, unfiltered. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "And what about Ethan?" he asked quietly, glancing at their son. Olivia hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. I can't stay here anymore," she said, avoiding his gaze. "I've already wasted too much time." Wasted. The word echoed in the room like a final blow. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Not angry, not desperate, just seeing her, clearly, for the first time. "Then go," he said. Olivia blinked, caught off guard. "That's it?" she asked. "You're just letting me walk away?" Daniel's voice was calm. "You already left." Silence filled the space between them. Heavy, final. Olivia grabbed her bag. Her eyes flickered toward the child for a brief second, but she looked away. Because staying would mean choosing a life she no longer wanted, and leaving meant choosing herself. At least, that's what she believed. "I hope you figure things out," she said almost coldly. Then she walked out, closing the door behind her. And just like that, Daniel was alone. Alone with a sick child. Alone with silence. Alone with a truth Olivia never cared to discover. Because what Olivia didn't know was that Daniel Hayes wasn't struggling. He wasn't drowning in debt. He wasn't failing. The hospital bills, already paid. The treatments, had arranged through the best specialists in the country. The house, a choice, a test. Because Daniel wasn't just a man trying to survive. He was a man who owned $1 billion empire, hidden, untouchable, operating quietly behind the scenes. The very industries Richard Cole bragged about, Daniel controlled them. The wealth Olivia chased, Daniel had built it long before she ever started dreaming of it. But he chose simplicity. He chose privacy. He chose love without conditions. And now, that love had been measured and found lacking, not in him, but in her. Daniel sat beside his son again, gently holding his small hand. "I've got you," he whispered. And this time, there was no one left to question him. Olivia Hayes stepped into her new life like someone finally breathing fresh air after years underwater. And everything felt different, better. The car that picked her up wasn't just expensive. It was the kind of luxury that turned heads without trying. The apartment Richard Cole brought her to wasn't just big. It was the kind of place that made you feel important just by standing in it. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, a skyline view that stretched endlessly. "This is your new beginning," Richard said smoothly, handing her a glass of wine. Olivia smiled, her fingers wrapping around the glass as she took it all in. This was what she had been waiting for. Not the quiet sacrifices, not the constant waiting, not the uncertainty. This was certainty. This was status. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had made the right decision. "You deserve this," Richard added, watching her closely. Just and Olivia believed him. Because everything about this world felt effortless. Doors opened. People listened. Opportunities appeared without struggle. Within weeks, Olivia was introduced into Richard's social circle. Wealthy investors, executives, people who spoke in numbers that once felt unimaginable to her. "You're with Richard now?" one woman asked during a private dinner, her tone laced with interest. Olivia nodded, smiling politely. "That explains it," the woman replied, exchanging a subtle glance with someone else. Olivia didn't fully understand what that meant, but she liked the reaction. Respect, recognition, something she never quite felt before. But beneath the surface, something wasn't adding up. It started small. Richard took a lot of calls, private ones. He would step away, his voice low, his tone suddenly less confident, more cautious. Once, Olivia walked in on him, mid-conversation. "Yes, I understand. We'll adjust accordingly," he said quickly before hanging up. When he turned and saw her, his expression shifted instantly, relaxed again, controlled. "Work," he said, with a casual shrug, but something about it felt off. Then there were the events, high-level meetings, exclusive gatherings, the kind of rooms Olivia had always dreamed of entering. But she noticed something strange. Despite Richard's wealth, there were moments when even he seemed small, subtle, almost invisible shifts, a hesitation before speaking, a glance towards certain individuals in the room, a need for approval. "Who's that?" Olivia asked one evening, and nodding toward a group of sharply dressed executives speaking quietly in the corner. Richard followed her gaze. "Oh, just board members," he replied quickly. "Not important." Not important. They didn't look unimportant. They looked like the kind of people who made decisions that shaped entire industries. And for a brief second, Olivia felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty, but she pushed it aside. Because this life, this was what she chose. This was the upgrade. Meanwhile, across the city, Daniel sat in a quiet, private medical suite. Nothing like the small setup Olivia had left behind. This place was different. Advanced equipment, specialists moving with precision, a level of care that most people could only dream of. Ethan lay peacefully, his breathing steady, as a doctor reviewed his chart. He's responding well," the doctor said. "The treatment is working." Daniel nodded slightly. "Good," he replied. There was no relief on his face, not because he didn't care, but because he already knew. Everything had been arranged long before it became critical. Every specialist, every procedure, every possible outcome, handled. Because when you have power, you don't wait for solutions, you create them. "Mr. Hayes," the doctor added carefully, "there's a board request for your presence at the upcoming executive summit." Daniel's eyes lifted slightly. "Is it necessary?" "They insist." Of course they did. Because despite his absence, despite his silence, Daniel wasn't just part of the empire. He was the empire. The unseen force behind every decision. The name that didn't need to be announced. Fine," Daniel said after a moment. "Schedule it." And just like that, the stage was set. Back in Olivia's world. The invitation arrived the next morning. A sleek black envelope placed neatly on the table. She picked it up, her curiosity rising instantly. Executive Summit, Cole and Partners Holdings. Her heart skipped. "This is huge," she said, turning to Richard. "I've heard about this. Only top-level executives are invited." Richard gave a small, controlled smile. "Yeah," he said, "it's important." Something about his tone felt restrained, but Olivia didn't notice, because all she could see was validation. This was it, the moment she had been chasing, the room where she would finally belong, the room that proved she made the right choice. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that this room didn't belong to Richard. It didn't belong to the people she was trying to impress. It didn't belong to the world she thought she had entered. It belonged to someone else, someone she had already abandoned. And as Olivia stood there, holding that invitation, excitement glowing in her eyes, she had no idea that she was about to walk straight into the truth, a truth so powerful it would destroy everything she believed about her life. The days leading up to the executive summit felt like a countdown to something Olivia couldn't fully explain. Excitement mixed with something else, something quieter, unsettling. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress for what felt like the 10th time. It was elegant, expensive, and exactly the kind of statement piece that belonged in rooms like the one she was about to enter. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "The moment everything becomes real." Behind her, Richard adjusted his cufflinks, his usual confidence slightly muted. "You ready?" she asked, turning to him with a smile. Richard forced one back. "Yeah, let's go." But as they stepped into the car, Olivia noticed it again, that hesitation, that subtle tension in his posture. "Are you nervous?" she asked lightly. Richard chuckled, but it didn't quite land. "Something like that." Olivia frowned slightly, but didn't push, because tonight wasn't about doubt. It was about arrival. The venue was nothing short of breathtaking, a grand hall bathed in golden light, filled with the kind of people Olivia used to only see in magazines. Power players, industry leaders, faces that carried influence without needing introduction. The air itself felt different, heavier, important. As they walked in, heads turned, some curious, some assessing, some recognizing. "Stay close," Richard muttered under his breath. Olivia nodded, but her eyes were already scanning the room, taking everything in, absorbing the energy. This was where she belonged now. Or at least, that's what she told herself. They moved deeper into the crowd, exchanging greetings, polite smiles, quick introductions. But something became clear almost immediately. The room wasn't centered around Richard. Not really. People acknowledged him, but they didn't orbit him. They weren't waiting on his words. They weren't watching him the way she expected. Instead, there was a pattern, subtle but undeniable. People kept glancing toward the entrance, as if waiting, anticipating. "Who are they waiting for?" Olivia asked quietly. Richard took a sip of his drink, avoiding her eyes. "You'll see," he said. That answer didn't sit right, because for the first time since she left Daniel, Olivia felt out of place. Not completely, but enough to notice. Then she overheard it. A conversation just a few steps away. "Is he coming tonight?" one man asked. "He always does," another replied. "He never misses this." "Good," the first man said. "Nothing moves without his approval anyway." Olivia's brows furrowed slightly. His approval? Who were they talking about? She glanced at Richard again, but this time she caught it. That look, that flicker of unease. And suddenly, a thought crossed her mind. A strange, irrational thought. But it wouldn't go away, because something about this entire situation felt familiar. And then came the next moment. A senior executive approached Richard, greeting him with a firm handshake. "Good to see you," the man said, then lowered his voice slightly. "Everything prepared?" Richard nodded quickly. "Yes, we're ready." The man's eyes shifted briefly to Olivia. "Enjoy the evening," he said politely, before walking away. But that wasn't what caught her attention. It was what he said next. Quiet, almost under his breath. "He'll be here soon." Olivia's chest tightened slightly. There it was again. That same invisible presence. The one person everyone seemed to revolve around, but no one had named. "Richard," she said, her voice lower now. "Who is he?" Richard exhaled slowly, but before he could answer, the room changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious, but it was immediate. Conversations slowed, movements paused, and like a ripple, moving through water. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Olivia felt it before she saw it. That shift, that weight, that presence. And then, the doors opened, footsteps echoed, calm, measured, unrushed, the kind of walk that didn't seek attention, because it already owned it. Olivia's heart started to race, not from excitement, but from something deeper, something instinctive. And as the figure stepped into the light, her breath caught in her throat. No, that's not possible. Her mind rejected it instantly, but her eyes refused to look away. And because standing at the entrance, dressed in quiet authority, surrounded by respect that didn't need to be spoken, was a man she knew, a man she had left, a man she had walked away from without looking back. Daniel, her ex-husband. The room stood up, Every single person, executives, investors, powerful figures who commanded entire industries, all rising to their feet. For him, Olivia's world tilted. Her fingers tightened around her clutch as her breathing became shallow. "No," she whispered, barely audible, but it was real, painfully real. Daniel walked forward, his expression calm, unreadable. The same man, but not the same presence. This Daniel was different, not louder, not flashier, but undeniable, unquestionable. And as he moved through the room, people stepped aside instinctively. Respect, and authority, power, the kind she had spent her entire life chasing, now embodied in the man she had abandoned. Olivia's chest tightened, her thoughts spiraling. This doesn't make sense. This isn't real. But it was, because deep down, the pieces were finally connecting. The unexplained opportunities, the seamless transitions, the invisible force behind everything. It was never luck. It was never Richard. It was him, Daniel. And suddenly, everything she thought she knew collapsed. Daniel didn't rush. He never had to. Every step he took across that grand hall carried a quiet authority that made the air feel heavier, more deliberate. Conversations didn't just stop, they dissolved. Laughter faded into silence. Even the music seemed to lower itself in his presence. Olivia stood, frozen, and her entire body felt like it had forgotten how to move. This couldn't be the same man. This couldn't be the quiet, patient husband she had left behind in a small house with a sick child. But it was. And the proof was everywhere. The way powerful men straightened as he passed. The way executives lowered their heads slightly in acknowledgement. The way the entire room remained standing until he reached the center. Only then did Daniel give a small nod, and like a silent command, everyone sat, except Olivia. She couldn't. Her legs felt weak, her chest tight, her thoughts crashing into each other all at once. Richard, standing beside her, looked different too, smaller. His usual confidence had vanished, replaced with something she had never seen before. Nervousness, respect, even fear. "Richard," Olivia whispered, her voice shaking. "What is this?" But Richard didn't answer immediately, because at that exact moment, Daniel's eyes found hers, across the room, and everything else disappeared. No crowd, no noise, just that one connection. Familiar, unavoidable, unforgiving. Olivia's lips parted slightly, her breath catching, as a flood of memories hit her all at once. The quiet dinners, the late nights, the way he always said, "I've got it handled." And suddenly, those words didn't sound empty anymore. They sounded like truth. Daniel broke the eye contact first, not out of weakness, but control. He turned slightly as a senior executive approached him. "Mr. Hayes," the man said respectfully, extending a folder. "Everything is ready for your approval." Mr. Hayes, the name echoed in Olivia's mind like a thunderclap. Hayes. Is her last name, his last name, the same name she had walked away from. Her fingers trembled. "No," she whispered under her breath. But the confirmation came anyway, loud, clear, public. Daniel opened the folder briefly, scanning its contents with calm precision. "Proceed," he said. One word, and instantly, things moved. Executives nodded. Assistants rushed quietly. Decisions were set into motion without hesitation. Because his word was final. Olivia's vision blurred slightly. She turned slowly to Richard. "Tell me I'm wrong," she said, her voice barely holding together. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Richard swallowed hard. For the first time since she met him, he looked like a man out of his depth. "That's Daniel Hayes," he said quietly. I know his name, Olivia snapped, panic breaking through. Who is he? Richard hesitated, just long enough to confirm everything. Then he said it. He owns everything. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. What do you mean everything? Olivia asked, her voice trembling. Richard let out a slow breath. This summit? His? The company I work with? His? The investors here? They answer to him. Each word felt like a blow. But you said, she started. I'm a partner, Richard cut in quickly. A senior one, but him? He shook his head slightly. He's the top. Olivia's heart pounded violently in her chest. No, that doesn't make sense, she whispered. But it did. Every strange moment, every unexplained door that opened, every opportunity that came too easily. It wasn't because of Richard. It wasn't because of her. It was because of Daniel. And he had been there the whole time, watching, allowing, not interfering, until now. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But deep down, she already knew the answer. Because he wanted to be loved. Without it. And she had failed that test. Completely. At that moment, Daniel began walking toward the stage. The room's attention followed him instantly. Olivia's heart dropped with every step he took. Because she knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. A microphone was placed in his hand. He didn't tap it, didn't test it. He simply stood there. And the room listened. I appreciate everyone being here tonight, Daniel began, his voice calm, steady, commanding, without effort. Olivia felt tears burn behind her eyes. That voice, the same voice that once spoke softly across a dinner table, not now holding an entire room captive. There's a lot ahead of us, he continued, new expansions, new leadership shifts, and new standards. His gaze moved across the crowd briefly, professional, controlled, until, for a fraction of a second, it returned to her and lingered, just long enough to say everything, without saying anything. Olivia's chest tightened painfully, because in that look, there was no anger, no revenge, just distance, final, irreversible. Daniel looked away again, and continued speaking as if she didn't exist. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else, because being ignored was worse than being hated. As the applause filled the room, Olivia stood there, completely shattered. The life she thought she upgraded into was built by the man she abandoned. The wealth she chased was already hers. The stability she wanted, she had thrown away. And now, she was standing in the middle of it all, not as a queen, not as a winner, but as someone who lost everything, without even realizing it. The applause faded, but the weight in Olivia's chest only grew heavier. It felt like the entire room was moving forward, talking, celebrating, networking, while she remained stuck in a moment that refused to let her breathe. Daniel stepped down from the stage, immediately surrounded by executives, investors, and powerful figures eager for his attention. People who once would have ignored him, now competing just to be acknowledged. Olivia watched it all in silence, her mind replaying everything, every word she said, every moment she doubted him, every time she looked at him and saw, not enough. And now he was everything she had ever wanted, and more. Olivia, Richard's voice came from beside her, uncertain, almost cautious, but she didn't respond, because Richard no longer mattered, not in this moment, not in this truth. I need a minute, she said softly, stepping away before he could say anything else. Her heels echoed against the marble floor as she moved through the crowd, her vision slightly blurred from the tears she refused to let fall. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed air, space, something to hold on to before she completely broke. She reached a quiet hallway just outside the main hall, the noise fading behind her as silence wrapped around her like a cold reminder of everything she had lost. And that's when she saw him, and Daniel, standing alone near a large window overlooking the city, calm, still, untouched by the chaos inside. For a moment, she hesitated, because suddenly she didn't feel worthy to walk up to him, but she did anyway. Daniel, her voice trembled. He didn't turn immediately, and that pause, that small delay, said more than any words ever could. When he finally faced her, his expression was composed, neutral, like he was looking at someone he used to know, not someone he once loved. "I didn't know," she said quickly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I swear, I didn't know any of this." Daniel raised a hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to stop her. "I know," he said calmly. That wasn't what she expected. No anger, no accusation, just acceptance. And somehow, that made it worse. "Then why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking now. "Why didn't you say anything?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth she could handle. "Because it wouldn't have mattered," he said. The words hit harder than any insult. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "You didn't leave because of money," he continued. "You left because of what you believed I was." Olivia's tears finally fell, because he was right, painfully right. "I was wrong," she said quickly. "I see that now. I made a mistake." Daniel nodded slightly. Everyone makes mistakes. Hope flickered in her chest, small, fragile. "Then maybe we can fix it," she said, stepping closer. "Maybe we can try again. For us. For everything we had." Daniel shook his head gently. And just like that fragile hope shattered. Some things don't go back to what they were," he said. Olivia's heart dropped. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "I didn't understand. I thought I was choosing a better life." "You did choose," he replied calmly. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. "And now you understand what that choice meant." The truth settled between them like a final verdict. Irreversible. Olivia wiped her tears, her voice barely holding together. "I left you when you needed me most." Daniel didn't respond, because he didn't need to. She already knew. "I left him," she added, her voice cracking completely now. "Her son. The child she had walked away from, without looking back. The child Daniel stayed behind to protect." For the first time, something shifted in Daniel's expression. Not anger, but something deeper. Disappointment. You didn't just leave me," he said quietly. "You left your responsibility." Olivia broke, completely. "I'll fix it," she said desperately. "I'll come back. I'll do whatever it takes." Daniel stepped back slightly, not aggressively, but enough to create distance. "That's not how this works," he said. "Then how does it work?" she cried. Daniel looked at her one last time, and this time there was something final in his eyes. "Life doesn't give you the same test twice," he said. Silence. The kind that ends everything. Olivia felt her knees weaken slightly, her entire world collapsing under the weight of that truth. Because for the first time, she understood. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about status. It wasn't even about him being a billionaire. It was about what she valued, and what she was willing to walk away from. And she had walked away from the one thing that actually mattered. Daniel turned slightly, glancing back toward the hall where his world continued without pause. "I made sure you'd be okay," he added calmly. "You'll never struggle." That hurt, because it sounded like goodbye, not just to a relationship, but to a chapter of her life she could never return to. And Ethan, she whispered, barely able to say his name. Daniel's voice softened, just slightly. He's getting everything he needs. A pause. Then, he always will. Olivia nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face, because she knew she wasn't part of that he anymore. And as Daniel walked past her, calm, composed, untouchable, he didn't look back, not once, leaving Olivia standing there, in the life she thought she wanted, surrounded by everything she chased, but emptier than she had ever been. Because sometimes the biggest upgrade is realizing too late you already had everything, and you let it go. Kindly subscribe for more exciting story.